Are you ready, kids?
I'm ready!
Oh! Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
SpongeBob BFBB!
Absorbent in yellow and porous is he.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the 94th episode of a long-running series where the name of the game is to try to find anything out of bounds that is remotely interesting, whether that be developer techniques or objects completely left behind. And I never thought I'd be doing this episode, but so many of you have been requesting it, and it won so many polls that I absolutely had to make my viewers happy. So, hope you enjoy it. We also got the world record holder for Battle for Bikini Bottom, Shift, on deck here, and he's going to be explaining some boundary breaking you can do at home. So anyways, with that said, let's get going. So the first thing that we have to talk about is the title screen itself. On a normal startup, you can see the island that's at the start of every SpongeBob episode. Then you travel down the ocean to see SpongeBob's pineapple house. But what's really cool about this is this entire scene is running in real time, and it's pulled off with very detailed and very large textures, all of which stays inside the map at all times. So we could take the camera right back up to where we started, get a nice good look at that island texture, as well as a wave effect that's shown before the large ocean water texture. Next up is switching characters. Normally in Battle for Bikini Bottom, a submarine would come by when you're ready to swap. Naturally, the question is, what does it look like on the other side? Does the character go anywhere? And as you're going to see here, the characters just sort of immediately swap out. But what's kind of funny is the submarine has only half a model, and because there's no backface culling, you can see the shape of the submarine as well.
This object hidden out of bounds is actually invisible, and used in speedruns of Battle for Bikini Bottom. To reach it, activate a cruise boost and outclip out of this area in the cave wall. There's an invisible trigger hovering above the spawn point out of bounds, and if you touch it, the prawn fight will instantly end before starting. The developers may have left this in for testing purposes and didn't think players would be able to reach it. Thanks to this oversight, speedrunners could turn this usually monotonous fight into a fast and fun speed segment.
Next up is a introductory cutscene for the enemy Monsoon. Now you're gonna notice here that the game cuts away for a second to make it look like it's in first person. And whether you're watching Boundary Break or not, once you watch this scene, you'll also notice that the arms seem to be completely detached from the model. So by no means am I revealing that secret to you. Oh, but turn that camera around and what do you find? It's the rest of the enemy model for Monsoon. And the reason for this is rather than make a separate character model for just the arms, the developers instead just use the arms that are attached to this character model, which has to stay in the scene somewhere in order for that to work. It's just kind of funny because any game that you play that goes into a first-person perspective like this has to come up with some technique to hide the character model so it doesn't get in front of the camera. But all the developers seem to have their own way of doing it, like the ones in Kingdom Hearts 2 will snap the character's head backwards and stuff. It's kind of interesting. Also, before I pass it back off to Shift for a second, I wanted to show you another clever use of reusing an asset. Well, at least it was meant to be clever. I don't know what's going on with my game, but you might notice that there's umbrellas underneath the water. And the reason for this is that when the button comes out of the lagoon, there's supposed to be a stick attached to it. And rather than make a button model with a whole nother stick, the developers instead used the stick from the umbrella and kept the umbrella part about it underneath the lagoon while the stick rises up with the button. In fact, there's a second example of it just below the one that comes out of the lagoon.
If you have the hand disabled, you can enter the inside of the Lighthouse model from this area attached to the springboard. There's a hidden message inside the Lighthouse model that actually tells us more about the springboard. Apparently, bubble bouncing on it will send us higher than usual. However, doing this here does not appear to amplify the bounce. The only trampoline that I know uses this property is in Goo Lagoon. Definitely some curious inconsistency here. A while ago, I was able to have a word with the lead software developer of this game, Jason Horner. He suggested that lead designer Joel Goodsell gave freedom to the programmers and designers to be creative, and didn't try to micromanage. Some of this freedom is why the game is so inconsistent, like in button behavior. Each was implemented and tuned by different engineers with their own philosophy about what was fun. This definitely sheds some light on why mechanics in this game function differently from one another when switching between worlds. Maybe the sign was implemented by the same engineer who programmed the trampoline in Goo Lagoon Pier.
Speaking speaking of Blue Lagoon Pier, there's in fact another sign that's hidden out of bounds. But you're not going to see it from here, so why don't we start traveling all the way back to where you start in the Blue Lagoon Pier. And although you might see it keep off the sand sign over off to the left, taking the camera through this rock formation over here shows you another sign that's completely hidden. And how many of you remember the Wacky T Keys game? Well, it's part of the game to know where these guys come from, which is underneath the deck, and they stay down there at all times. But how they behave while you're playing the Wacky T Keys game is something that not as many people have seen. And what I find to be the most interesting is that when the game is over, all the existing Tikis die all at once and get replaced with an entirely new set of Tikis. And the only thing more freaky than the Wacky T Keys is what's going on with SpongeBob when he does the bungee jumping. Because normally you can't see what's going on with his face while it's going through this minigame. But if we were to take the camera underneath SpongeBob, you can see that his eyes, for whatever reason, are just continuously pulsating. Some pretty freaky stuff.
The original method for reaching the out-of-bounds beach in Goo Lagoon was found by me in 2016, which exploited bowling out of bounds in this carnival tent and switching characters to disable the ball's ability to break. You can then drop the ball onto the goo and balance on it to travel wherever you want. However, this process is long and tedious, so I'll show you a much faster method found by a player named Super Flare Star. I'll use the Cruise Boost exploit, storing speed using the Bubble Bowl and Cruise Bubble on the same frame to activate Flare Star's Tiki Cup boost on this moving platform. The moving platform will make the store movement faster because the platform moves faster than SpongeBob can walk. Once this is activated, slam into the corner of these two tents to activate a sponge glide. In this glitch state, SpongeBob will stop falling during his bubble bounce animation and float in whichever direction he faces. Navigate to the tower in the distance to land and explore the out-of-bounds area. Yes, everything in this area is solid. I suppose the developers found it more efficient to leave this terrain solid, and it wouldn't have mattered because nobody expected us to reach this area without hacks. Ever wonder what the inside of the muscle bar looks like? If you look in the distance, you can even see the island with the sunscreen crates where you activate the final solar beam tower to complete Larry's mission.
I have brought you two here to face a great challenge.
I've got nerves of steel and muscles of sand.
Wow, there's a lot to talk about here, as there is for any cutscene for SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. But let's start off easy here. Before the Robo Sandy comes into play, you can find it underneath the arena, shaped into the good old-fashioned T-pose and everything. But while we're down here, you might notice something else, and that would be the golden spatula that appears after you defeat the Robo Sandy. And one little feature that I absolutely love about this game is that the fish newscaster pops onto the side of the screen to make commentary about what SpongeBob is doing, whether he gets hit or whatever else.
Ow! I guess SpongeBob won't be winning that way.
But much to my surprise, he isn't part of the HUD. Instead, wherever SpongeBob is running around is where he's moving with him, only moving in front of the screen whenever he's needed. And you know what, while we're here, let's do a zoom out of Poseidon's arena. There's two things that are out of reach of the camera that I do want to take a look at. The first one being the rock bottom pit that is used as a taxi stand before you go to the stage. Well, now we can get a much better look at it, and we can see that the pit ends pretty quickly actually. Though it's not meant to be represented that way, the texture at the bottom is pure black for a reason. And the other thing I wanted to look at was the entrance to the mermaid lair. See, there's a little cutscene that triggers where SpongeBob just jumps into the hole, but it's angled in such a way that you can't see where he goes or anything like that. But with camera manipulation, we can see that there's a texture on the bottom of this little hole. And we can also see what SpongeBob looks like when he jumps into the hole and is waiting for the screen to load. Also should point out that despite the fact that the holes are really shallow, for whatever reason this tube that you use to go back up to the surface is absurdly long. And yeah, you barely get to see any of this. And before we move on from the mermaid layer, there's two more wacky things I want to show you. The first one is during this cutscene after you defeat the boss. It's really difficult to catch because the scene moves by so quickly, but if you do, you can find Mermaid Man and Barnacleboy in T-poses. Barnacleboy kind of has half a T-pose. But by far the most absurd thing in this episode is Barnacleboy inside of the main computer. What the developers are doing here is using Barnacleboy as the thing that you talk to instead of creating an all-new NPC for the computer. You can find plenty of other examples of this in games like Super Mario Galaxy, where you can read a sign off of a door, but in truth, you're talking to a signpost behind the door. It's just that the funny thing with Barnacleboy here is that his voice changes into a female robot.
SpongeBob, press all of the security override buttons throughout the Merma lair.
And for whatever reason, expressions are mapped to him as well, despite the fact that the player's not supposed to see that.
One day while practicing in rock bottom, my camera locked onto the edge of an object, so I decided to free cam around for a bit. I ended up finding a very strange object far out of bounds, but I'll show you a consistent method for reaching it on your own. Acquire a cruise boost, climb these pipes and run to the end. Use a cruise bubble at the end of the pipe and aim straight ahead. If you have the fast cruise bubble cheat, sometimes referred to as cruise control, you'll get a better view. And here it is, just some random island out of bounds. Maybe it was left over from dragging and dropping these into the map with the renderware editor? Not quite sure, but it seems like a reasonable explanation.
Hey, next up is a viewer request, and as always, you can follow me on Twitter if you ever want to suggest something, or if you just want previews of the upcoming episode. And anyways, there was two that people really wanted to know. One of them was to see outside of the Sea Needle when you're inside the building, which in truth is pretty impressive. You can see that the town outside of it wasn't compromised too much, so that the game could save on resources. But by far the biggest request on Twitter was to see what happens to SpongeBob and crew when they get taken away by the hand. Right off the bat, you can see that the texture for the hand isn't that big. It doesn't even span long enough for the widescreen. And what happens is the character is taken just off screen, and then the animation is immediately reset once the checkpoint is loaded. When you're entering SpongeBob's dream, there's an eyelid effect that closes in on the screen before loading in the stage. That eyelid is a full 3D model, and not only that, it's definitively SpongeBob's eyelid, because if you look at it from a certain angle, you can see those signature eyelashes that SpongeBob is so well known for. Next up is Robo Patrick, and there's something very odd about him, and that is if you take the camera inside of his stomach, you can find a cavity on the inside that's completely unused. Now on the outside of Robo Patrick, there's a bolt for a belly button, but it looks like this cavity was meant for a phase in the boss fight that just landed in the cutting room floor.
This next hidden object was discovered by Cole Udd before I was even aware of this game's speedrunning community, and cannot be done while the hand disabled glitch is active. There is an out-of-bounds checkpoint stored under the starting platform in Larry's time challenge slope. You can reach it by acquiring a cruise boost and bashing over the invisible wall behind your spawn point. Drop below the platform and perform a precise slam to trigger the checkpoint and be taken by the hand immediately after. If done successfully, you'll be teleported halfway down the slide. This totally seems like a testing tool left in by the developers.
Well, now we're at the Krusty Krab. And the reason why we're at the Krusty Krab is because a lot of people want to know if Mr. Krab's office is in the barred off room. And taking the camera in there does show that there is an empty space. But whether or not this is intentional is hard to say. I suppose the largest evidence would be the back wall, as there's no reason to have a wall on the other side of that. However, everything else is accounted for because SpongeBob has to either interact with or look at all the other walls that are connected to Mr. Krab's office. Though a zoom out of the Krusty Krab looks absolutely great because for some reason the exterior is fully modeled. And we're at the tail end of our little adventure here, and of course, the last stop is RoboBob. Another viewer request is to look at the outside of Robo SpongeBob when your character is finally inside. And this is what that looks like. There's a little bit of a constriction as far as how far I can pan the camera out because the walls of the lab itself start to get in the way. But now you can get a clear visual of the mucus dripping down the nose, as well as everything else from an outside perspective. And also for some reason way down below there's a bunch of untextured, unused platforms. It looks like they were supposed to be used for something, but it was later cut. And I only make this assessment because I also found a weird cookie cut on the very bottom of the Robo SpongeBob. It's very clear that this cookie cut was 100% intentional, as it has weird jagged lines with no patterns.
One final out-of-bounds object I'd like to show is hidden within the brain of the giant robot SpongeBob. You can access this area with a cruise boosted bounce on the starting trampoline inside the final boss, then L-clip into the side of the brain. Climb the inner vessels for a bit and you'll notice a golden spatula floating in the center of the brain. It's actually the golden spatula corresponding to the small shell rule or not level in the menu. Though collecting this final spatula doesn't even end the game, you still need to destroy all 3 brain fuses to trigger the final cutscene, which can also be done from inside the brain.
Which coincidentally brings us right to that final cutscene. And in it, there are 2 interesting things to see here. One is where all those roboplanktons come from. In the cutscene, they come out of the machine. However, if we were to take the camera outside the boundaries, you can see that all those extra models of the roboplankton are stored well underneath the map. And when it's their turn to be part of the cutscene, they're immediately warped into place. And the last thing that I thought was really interesting was seeing SpongeBob do one last final pose before the credits, which for some reason the developers put him way off into the distance here, instead of keeping him with all of his friends. Folks, thank you so much for watching, and of course, right off the bat, gotta let you know, make sure you check out Shift's World Record Speedrun. I'll leave a link to that in the video description down below. Make sure you check it out, show some support, and have those bragging rights that you saw the run before it was covered on Summoning Salt's channel. But anyways, if you're new to my channel, I'm basically trying to do weekly episodes, so it's worth it to subscribe if you haven't already. And we cover all genres, whether it be Nintendo, Sony, or even Microsoft. So hope you're willing to stick around, and if not, hope you had a good time. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna take off and start working on Doom 2016. Catch you later.